Hello there. In this video, I will be showing you the mechanics of how enemy AI in Moral Spirit works. This video will be a little bit more technical than my other videos, and I assume you might have some basic programming knowledge. For each skill a character has, there is an associated AI command with a condition in a hierarchy. If it gets fulfilled, the AI will execute it, depending on how high it is in the hierarchy. Most AI commands are unconditional, so it'll just execute a random one of them. However, if there is a condition that has been fulfilled, that will have the higher priority and be executed instead. The AI command itself, code-wise, is a struct which contains a reference to the skill, an enum which is the type of condition the command has, a floating point number in case this condition checks the character's resolve percentage, and two integers, one which checks how many turns have passed and another which checks the amount of rounds that have passed. Although it seems fairly simple on the surface, the actual inner workings are more complicated. Even if all the commands were unconditional, the AI doesn't just randomly pick a command and use it on a random target. There are other variables taken into consideration. Around September, I decided to make the AI smart enough to exploit your party's weaknesses, rather than just using moves at random. In my video about courage points, I talked about how much courage points you can gain by exploiting a weakness, and this would apply to enemies too. As the player, however, you don't really know the weaknesses of the enemies you first encounter, unless you use a skill on them. It would be pretty unfair if enemies you were unfamiliar with started to use strong moves that your party members were weak to. To combat this, I decided to implement an opponent memory system, which keeps track of any known affinities your party members may have to each element. The enemies can then base their decisions on this information. When a battle starts, they have no idea what your characters are strong or weak to, and they initially experiment to test the waters. This could sneakily give your party members the opportunity to exploit any weaknesses, buff themselves, or debuff the enemies. When I first implemented courage points in the same month, there was the issue of enemies using courage skills as soon as they have enough points to use it, basically preventing them from using more powerful skills, which may cost more. I decided to put a conservative variable into the game's code. This variable calculates the enemy's courage points over their maximum courage points and turns it into a percentage. When the conservative meter is high, they are more likely to use basic skills to save these courage points up so that they can have a sufficient amount to heal themselves or use a more powerful skill if need be. Another aspect of the AI is how it ranks the elements of the skills. It does this based on how strong or weak a target is to that skill. The commands are then put into buckets of best, normal, and resist. You'll do normal ranked commands if there are no best ranked ones, or resort to the resist ranked ones if there are no normal ranked ones. The AI will also guard if you use a skill they are weak to 3 times. This is done with a counter that resets to 0 once the AI starts guarding. This was done for 2 reasons. One of them was to make encounters harder, since this will prevent you from constantly getting a blink turn icon, and the other was to give the opponents more of a level playing field to the player. Even though this sounds all pretty cool, this was not the primary reason I put this AI in the game. It was also a necessity, since gameplay is very egalitarian towards you and the AI. It would not be as fun if the enemies did not have as much access to the mechanics as you do, and even boss characters have similar stats to the players, and that on their own, they're not very strong. Therefore, it was necessary to put them in a group with different characters serving different functions. But a group wasn't enough to create a challenging battle. Strong AI would be needed to make a boss feel challenging and really test you on the mechanics. And what better way to test that than have the opponents know as much as you? That's all from me.